right. So, welcome, Harry. Harry Campbell, the rideshare guy.
Thanks for having me on, Greg. How are you?
So, I remember hearing your story 2015, 2016. Um, I had heard that there was this guy named the rideshare guy who was an Uber driver, I think, who started a blog that was getting a ton of traction.
In 2014, I was working full time as an aerospace engineer for Boeing, but I decided to start driving for Uber and Lyft on the side. And while it's not rocket science being a driver, it is tougher than it looks. As an engineer, though, I was very diligent about tracking my income and expenses and constantly experimenting with new strategies and even new opportunities in the gig economy like food delivery and scooter charging. Along the way, I started a blog to document everything I was learning and to share my journey with other drivers. I called it the Rideshare Guy.
Lyft actually turned me on to you.
Hmm.
So I was building a community platform at the time, and they basically were like, "Hey, there's this guy who's like doing stuff for Uber, and like you need to like we want to compete against him." And I was like, "Oh, what is happening?" So, anyways, I heard about you, mythical status, and I wanted to bring you on the show to talk about a bit of your story and how you can, yeah, and what you're up to.
Cool. Well, I guess my first question to you is what took you so long to have me on if you heard about me in 2015 or 16? I guess better late than never, right?
I mean, you know, there's the adage, "Never meet your heroes," and
Yeah.
I, I've actually in my past have kind of waited, not to meet people I've followed, and over the last year or two with this pod, it's given me a great excuse to just like hit people up
Yeah,
and be like, "Hey, do you want to chat?"
for sure. I know. I feel like there's so many cool people doing interesting things. Like the podcast is probably the perfect outlet or venue, like we could have a good conversation. We might as well record it so other people can hear. So as a podcast host myself of a couple different podcasts right now, I can definitely empathize with you.
There you go. So for people who don't know about you, can you give a little background about what your I'll call it a media empire around the
Sure.
gig economy is, and what's
Yeah.
the scale today?
Definitely. Yeah, no, and I appreciate that term because it is a little bit tough to describe what I do. And I mean, really kind of what it boils down to, though, is, I started driving for both Uber and Lyft all the way back in 2014 on the side, just to try it out, make some money. I had a full time day job as an aerospace engineer working for Boeing. So kind of the opposite of what I do now. But obviously, during that time period, the company started exploding, raising crazy amounts of money, hiring hundreds of thousands of drivers. And, I was really just like a leech on this rocket, this rocket ship. And so the companies exploded. And, I think really because there were so many people out there and this job was new too, right? Like people had driven taxi, people had driven cars, but driving for hire in this kind of fashion was so new. There was just so much interest and excitement around it. And so I kind of latched onto that. I started my blog. I started doing 3 or 4 articles a week myself. And, I started a YouTube channel. I started a podcast, the Rideshare Guy podcast, which I still run to this day. So it's sort of a weekly podcast, a little bit more focused on rideshare and gig delivery industry topics these days than kind of like I started off. It was like nitty gritty. I went out and drove Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. Here's how much I made. This person puked in my car. Here's how to avoid a puker, and I will say there is like no shortage of content and topics that you can kind of cover. You would think like, how hard is it to be a driver? But really, it is kind of a lot harder than it looks, and it's not rocket science. But I think I kind of just took advantage of the fact that there were so many people doing it. It was growing so fast, and people didn't really know what they were doing, and it's a little harder than it looks. And so over the years, I've built out a team of contributors. We're on probably every box on the internet. We've got the blog, podcast. We've got a couple different podcasts. YouTube is probably our fastest growing platform right now. We have, I just got our monthly reports. I think we have about 150,000, 160,000 subscribers, which is, not huge, but pretty good size. You can make a full-time living off of that. We do around 1 million views a month on YouTube, 75,000 email subscribers. So, it's basically to say we've got a pretty good reach across all our different platforms. We've got the TikTok, Instagram, all of that. We've got the courses for drivers. We've got audio books, Kindle books. I usually joke like any box on the internet, if you type in something related to Uber, Lyft, gig economy will probably pop up for better or worse. So that's kind of what the business looks like today, and I'm happy to dive into that, or sort of what I've kind of transitioned to focus more on. But that's kind of the high level.
Right now, over the last 12 months, there's been this trend, for these anonymous accounts.
Hmm.
People are calling it the Guy Mafia.
Oh yeah, they
There's
totally
this,
I'm totally on board with the Guy Mafia.
yeah. So what they mean by that is like the strip mall guy, the self storage guy, the designer guy, and you really pioneered that concept. I think. How important do you think the name the rideshare guy was to unlocking a lot of the success in the early days?
Yeah. So I will say I totally ripped it off from one of my idols, the points guy. So I was a big, before I ever started the rideshare guy, I've always been dabbling in online businesses. I started 3 personal finance blogs. I was doing freelance travel writing, just kind of covering topics that I was interested in. And I kind of feel like, I wasn't an expert from all of those, businesses or gigs that I did, but, I learned a lot and kind of like got my feet wet, I guess you would say. And so I totally loved the points guy. It was like the only travel blog I read. And, so when I kind of started brainstorming ideas and names for my site, the rideshare guy kind of rose to the top of the list. And I wouldn't say that like when you introduced me, you said the rideshare guy. Like I've walked into rooms at Lyft and Uber and they're like, oh, it's the rideshare guy. So it definitely, there's something there with the branding. But I think that, like a great brand on top of a great community or on top of a great platform is like the key to success, right? If you just have a great name, not like rock, any revelation or anything, like a great name on its own doesn't do much. But I think like that kind of in tandem, I think has, helped me a bit, made me a bit more memorable. So I'd say it's in like that 10 to 20% range that it's given me like a little bit of boost. Like if I would have picked a shittier name, maybe I would have got 10 or 20% less revenue or deals or connections. I think it did have an impact, but maybe not a huge one.
My take on that is I think it had more than a 10 or 20% lift. I
Mm,
think a name is like naming in general is just really underrated.
yeah.
Especially when you were coming up with this name. Like the points guy was pretty massive, but like,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. I actually
Yeah.
think what's going to happen with the Guy Mafia is there's almost like a saturation.
I kind of one of my podcasts that I'm doing right now called Wannabe Angels, which I think is another good name for investor. It's like an investor podcast, and I think we always joke like the best part about that podcast is the name. And I always mention, we have a vertical SaaS guy. I'm like, oh, you should be the vertical SaaS guy. And with this whole Twitter Guy Mafia, I think there was a car dealership guy who I follow, and I think I saw this another guy, Nick Huber, sweaty startup. He tweeted out some list of accounts to follow the other day, and it was all like the blank guy. And I'm like, oh man, people are really leaning into this Guy Mafia. And I mean, it does sound good, but I do think, yeah, some of the novelty and cachet is probably wearing off. Like, I don't know that I would name a business the blank guy today, because it does, it's a little bit saturated at this point, right? Like it stood out when I did it.
When you're coming up with a name for a business, do you have any naming frameworks or how do you come up with names for companies, products, podcasts, communities?
I feel like in general, I either let someone else smarter than me or more creative than me come up with a name and work with them. So my co-founder for my conference, Jonah, he came up with a name called Curbivore, because it's sort of at the intersection of last mile delivery and policy and restaurants and retail, everything that's happening at the curb. Ride hail, pick up and drop off. So we do an in-person event in LA, and everybody loves the name Curbivore. Sort of like play off of herbivore, but eating the curb. And other than that, though, like when I've came up with the rideshare guy name and Wannabe Angels with my co-host Colin for that podcast, I think we just wrote down, like for rideshare guy, I specifically remember writing down like a list of 50 different names. And I think the key that I've discovered with naming is you kind of want to be niche, but you don't want to be too niche. You don't want to be too broad. Like I knew for sure that I didn't want to be like the Uber guy, because I was like, well, what if there's another company beyond Uber, right? And so I think Rideshare Guy was sort of like a little bit lucky that I picked the right niche. But, for a while in 2018 and 19, our most popular content on both the blog and YouTube was actually scooter content when Bird and Lime and all these companies were exploding. And so I was sort of like, oh man, everyone thinks of me as the rideshare guy, but like our most popular content is all about scooters now and charging scooters. And then the last 2, 3 years, honestly, we've had a lot. It's probably 50-50 now, but like we have a ton of interest in delivery. And so, people still think of me as the rideshare guy, but like half of our revenue and traffic probably comes from, last mile delivery now. So Uber Eats, Instacart, DoorDash, those types of topics. So I think to me, I think about it like, hey, I don't want to be an expert in every one of these domains. I want people to think of me as the rideshare guy. Anything, any Uber or Lyft question, come to me. I'm the guy to talk to. But we also dabble. We know enough to be dangerous in some other areas like food delivery. And even though I might know quite a bit about food delivery, I'm not really trying to like actively market myself as like the food delivery guy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, would you ever consider sort of unbundling the rideshare guy into multiple accounts slash
Yeah.
businesses?
So I thought about it when the scooter craze was happening because it was, it was still gig work, but I mean, we were doing YouTube reviews of scooters and posting it on the Rideshare Guy YouTube channel. So you have like a video about how to drive for Uber, and then the next video is like a scooter review, right? Pretty random, but our scooter reviews were getting hundreds of thousands of views. So I was like, all right, well, I kind of have to do this. And I think what I've learned over the years is you to segment audience, you really have to have a big following. I think it sounds great in online marketing. If you've got an email provider, they're like, hey, you should take your rideshare people, you should take your delivery people, you should take your full time, who likes videos, who like articles, and create all these different segments. And in order to do that, you have to have like a massive following. I would say like in the millions of people, in the hundreds of thousands, maybe, to really start segmenting. Like the only segment we do is like rideshare and delivery, right? So we have like two really high level segments, and I've experimented with a lot of different others, and it's just so much work that goes into like managing those different segments. Like if you launch a brand new account, unless I had a million subscribers on YouTube, I think that it would be really difficult to kind of get those economies of scale from launching a second channel. I think you see like Mr. Beast, he's got his main channel and he's got his philanthropy channel, and that works out really well, but he's the biggest and best creator on all of YouTube, right? Like I'm way below Mr. Beast. So I think that would be kind of my personal experience and caution, is that it sounds so good on paper or on a PDF, or, when you're taking an online course, like, oh, segment this and that. But in reality, it's a lot of work, and I don't really recommend it unless you have a huge, huge following.
So, what advice would you give to, let's say, a sweaty startup, Nick Huber, who, is running ten guy accounts companies right now and really took your branding advice to heart?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe I should be taking advice from him because he seems to be doing pretty well. But I think with someone like him, I think that he's kind of unlocked a strategy that seems to be working pretty well in leveraging either his main account, his main persona. And, I think he might be kind of at that inflection point where he is big enough to, kind of go and launch these other brands. And I think as long as you're still doing something that you enjoy, there's still a business opportunity and you're kind of able to leverage other properties, that to me is the big thing. And everyone is different, like to me, I'm all about like high leverage, working as little as possible and making as much money as possible, but that not everyone is like that. And I think sometimes people try to force themselves into, a certain pigeonhole. But if that's not your, like, if you're the grinded out type of personality, you probably shouldn't be doing things like me, where like I won't even docu-sign something, I'll send that to one of my virtual assistants because it saves me 5 seconds if it's like a basic document.
Could you talk more about the business model of the whole
Sure.
company? So, you've got all these content, properties, and you mentioned courses. I'm sure there's ad revenue. Like, how you think about business model, and when did you think about business model?
Yeah, so I would say to answer the when is, I've done a lot of content over the years, and content is tough because I think most people don't think of it as a product, right? When you think about a company forming, you've got CEO, chief operating officer, chief product officer. There's no chief content, there's a chief marketing, right? But it's usually less on the content and more on paid. There's very rarely a chief content officer, but I think to me, like, I think if you're going to do content, you have to think of it as a product. You have to think of it in those other veins. And I think that if you do it well, it's tough. It can have similar returns. It can be valuable. It's not as competitive, right? If not a lot of people are doing something, that means that if you do it really well, you can kind of get outsized returns. And so for me, when I started the Rideshare Guy, I think really in any project that I do, the three things I look for is something that I'm interested in, something that has a good business potential, and something that's going to help people. I rarely will do anything in my entire life that's like one of those three three categories. It's always, something more than the other, right? If I just got a text message to take a GLG investor call, right? Like, okay, that's going to be more for the money than it is to, like help people. I'm still helping someone, but it's someone who runs like a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. Do they really need my help? I'm probably doing that one more for the money. Okay. But every project, those are kind of like the three, sort of, if you're drawing a Venn diagram, those are the three things that I look for. And so when I started the Rideshare Guy, I thought there was a good business opportunity. I thought it'd be really cool to help a bunch of people who are like trying to figure out this new line of work. And I just, frankly, I think gig work is really cool. I want to kind of share it with more people. And obviously there's millions of people doing it now, so there's something that people enjoy about it. And I wasn't really expecting to make much money at the start. I kind of, in general, with content, I always tell people, like, do it for a year, pick something you like, pick something that has a good business opportunity, and see what happens. But at the end of that year, I think you should sort of be happy with the journey and the results. And if you made money along the way, great. If it exploded into a huge business, even better. And so that was kind of my initial framework going into the Rideshare Guy. And within about 3 to 6 months, I did start making some money, and that was more off of driver referrals. So Uber and Lyft kind of have famously paid thousands of dollars for driver acquisition over the years, and now it's kind of come down, maybe more normal acquisition prices, hundreds of dollars for a driver. And so over the years, we kind of started off monetizing by mainly driver referrals, some affiliate stuff, which would be, gas app like Get Upside is one of our top affiliate partners. They help you save on gas, so pretty good fit, obviously, for Uber and Lyft drivers who put 1,000 to 2,000 miles a week on their car. And so today, we have three or four main revenue sources. Probably the biggest one would be affiliate. So that would be, either signing people up. I kind of call it affiliate, signing people up to drive for Uber, Uber Eats, Instacart, DoorDash, and, really any kind of platform. Signing them up to be a driver, that kind of falls under affiliate. And then we also have other affiliates like Get Upside, others in the cashback space like Ibotta, Fetch. I mean, I think in like one of our Get Upside is a good example because they were sort of VC funded, had a lot of money at a certain point, and I think they were paying us like $5, acquisition for a free app download for like a perfect product for our audience, right? And I think at one point we probably did 50,000 referrals in a single month for them at like the heyday 2-3 years ago when they were spending a lot on marketing, and kind of we were ranking number one for every code around Get Upside, download, Get Upside referral, promo code, all of that. And so the affiliate stuff is definitely temperamental and kind of goes up and down, and they can pull the plug at any time. But affiliate is probably our main one. And then we also do a lot of direct advertising. And so over the past 2-3 years, we've done a lot of direct campaigns with, the platforms themselves. So some companies, we might be an affiliate and they're like, hey, you're doing great as an affiliate. Let's do some extra work with you. Others, like right now, we have a few deals working with a lot of fintech apps, right? New banking apps for gig workers, combine your personal and business accounts, get a cash advance or whatever it might be. So we do a lot of direct deals. And so that would be, they come to us and maybe sponsor our newsletter, do a sponsored blog post, sponsored video. Maybe we'll do a pre-roll ad for them. We've got like 10 or 20 different options that they can do, that we have a weekly live show that they can sponsor and have a banner. So I think that's pretty straightforward. And then we have some other ancillary revenue sources, like I'll do consulting deals, retainers, one-off calls. We do have some products that we sell to drivers directly, but honestly, that's probably less than 5% of our revenue, like our courses and coaching. And it's just been really tough for me to sell directly to drivers who frankly aren't making a lot of money. We've had much more success, negotiating with the bigger companies or VC funded or, people with a lot of money to blow or to spend basically. And, then I also work with a lot of startups. And so I guess that would be less on the money side. And, I'm an advisor for 10 or 15 startups. I've been angel investing for the past 3-4 years, and I ended up starting a little mini fund. So investing in some companies. So, I guess I haven't really made money off of that yet, but hopefully someday I will.
On the affiliate side of things, what does like an Uber pay for a referral to, for a driver? Just to give
Yeah.
people a sense of like,
So probably $100 to
scale.
$200. I mean, in the heyday, they were paying $500 to $1,000, and that's sort of where, like, I kind of feel like I had a little bit of a cheat code in the first few years. Like, I shouldn't have been making. I ended up quitting my day job within about 9 months of starting the Rideshare Guy, and in a normal situation, I probably shouldn't have been able to do that. Uber was kind of like a once in a generation kind of company where they were growing so fast, and raising so much money that they were just paying, literally $500 to $1,000 for driver referrals, and they were double sided. So like the new driver signing up was getting money, I was getting a lot of money, and so we kind of monetized off of that. So these days it's come down quite a bit, and so maybe more in the $100 to $200 range for delivery services. It might be 25 to 100, maybe up to 200 in some of the top markets, but sort of rideshare, delivery, and then all of our other affiliates might be more in like the $5 to $50 range. If it's a free mileage tracking app, that might be $2 to $5 per download. If it's more of a bank account, that might be more in the $50 to $100 kind of range.
And where do you want to take it? Like, what's exciting to you? It feels like you've kind of, like, from an outsider, honestly, it feels like you're at the top. Like, you're at the top of your niche,
Yeah,
and you've got like you're doing the courses, you're doing the
yeah,
affiliate, you're on all the platforms, you've got a bunch
yeah,
of shows. I'm sure you're making 6 to 7 figures in revenue a month on the business. It sounds like you've got it pretty much like you've won, you beat Bowser,
yeah. I don't know if we're
Um,
making quite that much. I'd be doing real well if we were that. Probably more like 5 to 6 figures a month. But I think that definitely, to me, I would say that like I am definitely an entrepreneur at heart, and so I've really kind of used the rideshare guy. It's just like I think obviously you can see a lot of the work that I put in, and this isn't my first rodeo. It wasn't my first. I have many businesses that failed, right, or many blogs or websites that didn't work out so well, but I think it's like such a good springboard into other ventures, right? And so really any kind of itch that I want to scratch as an entrepreneur, I've sort of been using the rideshare guy to do that over the past few years. And I would say probably the biggest examples, maybe more directly to the business, would be like electrification. We're really interested in like EVs and that intersections. We've done a lot of consulting work, reviews of different vehicles, so we're kind of investing. We started a Facebook group that has 6 7 thousand or 5 6 thousand EV Uber and Lyft drivers. It's like the only and kind of biggest group there. So that's kind of like an area that I just was spending some time, that I kind of invested time, money, resources. And then the conference that I mentioned, like I've done everything primarily digital. You can make way more money, better, or not way more, but better returns. I would say like marginal returns, I guess you would say. And so, I wanted to do something in person, bring people together. And so the conference we've been putting on, we've done it now 2 years in person in LA. Our most recent one had 750 people. And that is really kind of at the intersection of last mile delivery, restaurant and retail, public policy, and kind of anything and everything in between. And frankly, it's just like a really good excuse for me and my co-founder, Jonah, to put on an awesome party, to bring a lot of people together, to have really great food. Like I literally do that conference for myself. Like I don't do anything at that conference that's boring, not fun. We make some money off of it, but it's not my biggest revenue source. And then the other area that I've kind of been personally interested in over the past few years is angel investing. And I really, I'm not going to go start a startup anytime soon. I'm way too lazy for that, way too much work. But I do get a lot of energy out of helping entrepreneurs, seeing people grow, and maybe passing some of my knowledge. And frankly, like I think it's infectious to be around people that are like working their ass off if you don't necessarily have to do it yourself. So it's sort of fun to be involved in that process and journey. And so I've invested probably $500,000 or $600,000 of my own money in 20 to 30 startups and maybe 10 funds over the past 3-4 years, and ended up meeting my friend Colin, and we started a podcast called Wannabe Angels. And so I think we're about 15 published and maybe 20 episodes total in, and that is to kind of scratch that itch. But as you might imagine, like the companies that I'm investing in, I'm not, I'm like investing in, maybe less rideshare adjacent, like gig
mhm.
economy, food, restaurant and retail, logistics, mobility, anything that kind of like leans into these areas that, I know a little bit, enough to be dangerous about, but maybe I'm not an expert in. So I think that's kind of where I'm at in the stage of the business. And I did actually just bring on a big business partner too, to kind of help run the website of and the kind of back end side of things. So we've got some goals there, which we can get into. But I guess on a personal level, that's kind of like what I've been dabbling in.
So the Points Guy is an interesting story. So Points Guy started very similar to you. I think
Yep.
it was he worked at Brian
I think he
Kelly.
was an
He worked
investment
at,
banker. Yeah.
yeah, investment banker at JP Morgan or something like that. Morgan Stanley actually, and he just started blogging about points on different credit
Yeah.
cards, and it was right around the right after the great financial crisis, so there was a lot of demand
Yeah.
for, saving money and just points. And he ended up taking a different path than you did. Although he did monetize via affiliates like you did, but the different path that he took is he sold his business to Bankrate
Right.
in 2012, which I think got acquired again in 2017. Have you ever
By Red
thought
Ventures,
about?
right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever thought about? I'm sure you have, but like,
Hmm.
when is the right time to sell,
Yeah.
or how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so this is probably I would love to discuss this, but I'll sort of caveat it with that I'm definitely not an expert here, and that's kind of one of the reasons that kind of interests me about it. Like I've never sold a business, and so like as an entrepreneur, I think you kind of always want to work on new things, try new things, and so for me, it's like I've done all these different things. I've never sold Rideshare Guy or never sold a business, so it's like kind of that part is like almost more interesting. Of course, I want to make money off of it if I do sell, and I think like up until this point, up until recently, I guess you would say, I've always thought about my business as like I probably value it a lot more than someone is willing to pay. Like, hey, if Uber came and offered me, I don't know, 10, 20, $50 million for it tomorrow, I'd probably sell it. But I doubt that they value it in the same way that I do, right? Because I put so much time and energy and, like I also like what I do, like I only work on parts of the business that I enjoy, and I've kind of transitioned and done a lot of different roles and hired people and all of that. So like I wake up every Monday morning like pretty refreshed. I just went on vacation last week and I was pretty excited, to come back to work and check all my emails, right? Because I knew it'd be like kind of fun stuff, Greg emailing me about coming on the podcast, fun stuff to do. So I think like when it comes to selling the business, I've never, it's never been a goal of mine by any stretch, but I've definitely over the past 2 to 4 years built the business to sell. I would say that I think there's a famous saying like even if you're not going to sell a business, you want to build it to sell. And really, what that means for me personally is there's the brand, the Rideshare Guy. People know me. That's how they think of me. But if you go and look at our videos, our content, I've got a number of contributors. It's really not me anymore doing the content. I'm still not even the face, but I'm still involved. People still know me. But I think that like if someone did want to come in and buy the Rideshare Guy tomorrow, it wouldn't be like they're buying me. I think they're buying a brand. They're, most of the time, if we get a media inquiry, I've been quoted like over 3,000 times in the media, as a rideshare gig economy expert. But these days, when we get a media inquiry, I send it to one of my top contributors. I don't even take those unless I have some pre-existing relationship with the reporter. I want, and actually like kind of stealing from the Points Guy. I remember I heard this NPR interview once and they're like, we're going to bring in, senior contributor at the Points Guy, Kelly something, Kelly whoever, and she's going to talk about points. And I was like, that's awesome. Like the Points Guy is getting mentioned in this NPR story, and Brian, the CEO or founder, doesn't even have to be on the interview. Like that is really cool to me. And so that's kind of how I think I've done a pretty good job of that over the past few years. And I actually ended up bringing on a business partner earlier this year. They're called MMG Media. They've bought and sold a bunch of properties and they've exited businesses, and their 5-person team that I've been really enjoying working with. And really, it's to kind of have them take over a lot of the back end. I think the things that would be even more attractive to a potential acquirer, right? Like they're going to care a lot more about affiliate revenue than upfront sponsored, like advertising deals, right? Like they kind of care more about those longer term type things. And so really kind of building the business. I've never been an expert. Like I know the basics of SEO, but like that's like my nightmare. I don't want to sit there tracking keywords and doing all the boring stuff. And I'm really good at like getting out there, marketing, developing relationships, making a lot of noise, being quoted in the media, writing op-eds, having content everywhere, and less so like, hey, we covered this topic 3 years ago, and this new post is going to kind of cannibalize our old posts in the eyes of Google search. We should probably update this old one, but that's sort of why I brought on my business partners. They're very good at that type of stuff. So I guess I would say that, regardless if we end up selling or not, I think we're kind of like building the business behind the scenes now in a much more like I was able to kind of take the business to a point where I think it's like somewhat attractive from the outside because it's not just me anymore. But now we're trying to build the business behind the scenes that's even more attractive if we were to want to sell in the future.
So this is the first time I've heard about MMG Media, and they look awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just on their website. I'm just on their website. So
I
it says
haven't
we
really
are.
announced my partnership with them. I've kind of mentioned it or teased it, and I'm sure we'll kind of announce it a little bit more. I guess you're getting the exclusive right now, Greg.
I love it. I love it. You're too good to me. On their website, it says we are obsessed with building notable brands that meet people where they are in their financial journey, and they build by they basically have three services. They either number one they build or buy, number two they scale, and number three they sell. So sell meaning they've got strong relationships with the network of buyers.
Yep.
Our team has scaling is basically, I think, similar in your boat, where we grow revenue and traffic with a heavy emphasis on SEO and affiliate partnerships, and then the build and buy. And they've got a portfolio. It looks like bankbonus.com, Millennial Money, Financial Residency, and of course the Rideshare Guy. Can you talk us through your relationship with them and what they
Sure.
handle and
Yeah.
how it's been?
Yeah, definitely. So Grant, the CEO, I've known for a while since I sort of got my bearings in the personal finance world, and you can sort of tell from the sites they listed off, they've got, they've been kind of more focused on the finance side of things, and I think Millennial Money is kind of their famous site that, if you look up, I believe he has a blog post or two about him selling it to, I want to say, gosh, I can't remember. It wasn't Bankrate, but it was someone like that he sold it to, and I don't think he announced the price, but I think he announced, it was a lot of money, and then I think he ended up buying it back at some point too, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, so I've sort of personally known him for a while, and I guess to me, like kind of seen them, like you kind of listed off all the marketing copy on their site, and I've kind of seen that in action. So that's sort of where it's like, hey, to me, that it's not that hard to write that on a website and create good copy and landing page, but like to me, the reason why I was even interested in partnering with them in the first place is because I've seen them do that in action, build a site like Bank Bonus from the ground up, build his own site, sell it, and kind of do some of that. And they've got a lot of experience and are good at some of the things that I'm not good at. And so I sort of feel like it was like kind of fitting two good pieces of a puzzle. And so at a high level, that's kind of what interested me in the first place, in working with them. And basically we are still, I mean, we've got an official partnership agreement and all that, and they're kind of my official business partners, but I will say that, kind of like integrating a business like mine that's been doing something, in all our different ways for 10 years almost, is like, it's there's a lot of moving pieces, right? And so basically we're kind of at the stage where they're really focused on the website and SEO, and we've kind of actually completely redesigned the site, back end architecture, redone hundreds, if not probably close to 2,000 pages on the website and optimized for SEO. I'm about to record a bunch of, like really high quality videos with a videographer for our top 7 SEO affiliate type pages. So we're really just trying to, at this point, to like build up the traffic. It was kind of like, hey, we've got this ship and now we're kind of writing it in the correct direction. Not that we were doing a bad job before, but, if you look at like how much money can you make driving for DoorDash, that's probably like a top keyword for DoorDash affiliates. And there's a lot of sites with lower domain authority, less credibility than us outranking, because the SEO side of things has never been my area of expertise, focus, or something that frankly I even enjoyed. And so it's sort of like, hey, I knew we were always leaving some money on the table, but I like working on things that I enjoy and that I'm good at. And so that's kind of where we're at with them. And basically I kind of they've got a 5-person team, and I brought them all on as sort of like a equity, and I guess you would say sort of, I mean, they're basically like a 50-50 partner, I guess you would say. And so they are have a lot of upside in the business if we do really well, if we exit, whatever it might be. And so that's kind of what they're handling for me.
I feel like this is a model that's going to happen a ton in a bunch of other niches.
So what I really like about the deal that I set up with Grant and his team is that I'm paying them nothing up front. Like they are really putting their money where their mouth is, and they have a lot of upside, but if things don't work out, they're not going to make any money. And so it's sort of like combining, right? Like I think a good example, like I do a lot of stuff with the media, and I usually kind of like workhorse it myself, and like work with the startups and companies to like get them featured or whatever it might be. And there's a million PR services out there you can hire for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, and none of them will guarantee anything, right? So it's like you could pay someone a lot of money with no guarantee of results. And to me, like that's like a space where there are definitely some good people, but I feel like a majority are just gonna, kind of like talk a big game, and it'll sound really good, and you'll end up wasting your money. Um, and I think in the deal that I set up with them, with MMG Media, they have a lot of upside. Sort of like they've got that social proof, but then they're putting their money where their mouth is. And to me, I think the biggest reason why it's a good fit is because like what they bring to the table and what I bring to the table are two really good skills, but different. Like I'm good on the content and creative and relationship and marketing, and they're kind of good on a, like what I would like joke, the more boring stuff. Like you can't hire the best SEO person in the world for $100,000 a year. You probably can't hire them for $1 million a year, to be perfectly honest. Like you almost have to get the best people, incentivized, upside, equity, that kind of partnership. But it can be really, complex structuring a deal where, you kind of connect on a personal level and you guys are aligned like on a, I almost think of like every deal I do should almost be like a handshake deal. Like you should almost like agree on a handshake basis, and then you obviously have to like legalize it all up. But it's like you kind of almost have to like agree on like a handshake and like sort of bigger picture level, before you go into anything.
I had a call earlier this morning with a entrepreneur who
Hmm.
has a partnership opportunity on the table. He's got, a pretty good business, and he doesn't know if he should bring them on as equity partners. And he's
Hmm.
got this big fear that, well, what if, what they say they're going to do is not exactly what they're going to do? And
Yeah.
what advice do you have to someone like that?
I mean, I think that that is a very reasonable fear. I feel like most partnerships don't work out, to be perfectly honest. Like whether it's like a personal relationship or a business partnership, like business. I mean, literally, anytime you bring two people together, right, or two groups together, it's like tough. It's like what I mean. Whether it's personal or like obviously, right? What is the stat? 50% of marriages end in divorce, right? Like I'm sure that it's higher, or I don't know if I'm sure. I'm sure it's in the same ballpark for business relationships based off my personal experience. Like, when you get started with something, it's just hard to maintain over time. And so I think if you kind of go into it, like to me, it's all about leveling up. Like I feel like there was like 10 different things that happened in my life in order to get me to say yes to this partnership with MMG Media. The first thing would be like, hey, I've done a good job building something up on my own, but I think to get it to that next level, I've tried and I haven't quite, been able to do it on my own, hiring the people that, I've been hiring. Number two, I've done a lot of business partnerships, sort of like starting my first course that I started like 8, 9 years ago. We started off with another guy and it ended up like after 2, 3 years, we sort of broke up and it was somewhat amicable. And I think I kind of paid him out of the business. But, it was like, I don't even think we had an actual agreement for that. Like my Herbivore conference co-founder, we usually at the end of every year, we like decide how we want to divvy up the money. You know what I mean? It's like not the best way of doing it. But, I've had experience and, sort of know different people. And like with that, like I know what to expect, right? Like I know that, hey, we haven't done a good job, like up front. We have, a bunch of reasons for why we do it that way. And then, maybe third or fourth, like I've seen MMG in action, right? Like again, with that PR example, like there are one or two PR firms that I actually recommend to startups because I've seen them work with companies of mine. It's like, yeah, they'll charge $10,000 or $7,000 a month. But I've seen them, with a good company and with a good pitch, get great write ups and do good work. So it's like they've got that social proof. And then, with the MMG, it's like, all right, now they're putting where the deal we structure, they have a lot of upside, but they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're not taking anything up front. So I think like I would kind of look at it like combining two, three, four, five, six things anytime you're looking to bring someone on as a partner. Like it can't just be one thing that sounds good. It sort of has to be like, wow, there's a multitude of factors that all lead me to saying yes. And then I think the other thing too is like my business is quite different than, like a bootstrap. I would call my business bootstrap. I've never raised money or anything like that. A bootstrap type of business, I think like giving up equity is a lot different than, I think I'm sure taking on like a 50-50 partnership as like a VC funded startup is like crazy, but in bootstrap world, it's like completely different. And I think, different situations. So I think that's the other sort of caveat.
The advice I gave to this entrepreneur was create a timeline of all the interactions that you've had with this potential
Hmm.
partner. Just like
Yeah.
get a piece of paper, write down all the interactions that you've had. Okay, how many years has it been? One, two,
Yeah.
5, 10. Okay. How did they make you feel when they did this? Did they under
Yeah.
promise and over deliver? Did they say they were going to do this thing and it didn't happen? And just all the
Yeah.
things that you can possibly remember, just like write it on a timeline. And most importantly, write the outcome of how you felt in that moment.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Because if you're getting into business with someone, like you want to have fun and you want to
Yeah.
smile and you want to have a good time too. So you want to, you know, you want to basically have records of how you're feeling about all
Yeah.
these situations. And I asked this guy now, and he to come back with me with this timeline, and he texted me actually today, and he said like, you know what? There's been a few interactions with this
Yeah.
person that have been pretty negative,
Yeah.
and but they are the best. They are the best. And insert social proof here. Insert social. And I was just like, it's not worth it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not worth partnering with someone where you're going to have 10-20% negative relate
Yeah.
outcomes, because you know it's very hard to undo these relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that framework. And I think that, I haven't thought about it too much. So this is kind of fun that you're asking me about this. But I imagine that, like, if everything isn't aligned, like, I feel like most often in business partnerships, things like diverge, then get better. You know what I mean? Like, you almost have to be like 1000% on the same page because it's going to be tough. You're going to have some ups and downs. And, I feel like more often, people's personal lives or situations change, and that adds a wrench, like, oh, I can't spend as much time because I have a kid now, or I moved, or whatever, right? So it's like it can only add more to the mix. So if you're not like super aligned, I mean, even one thing I considered in working with Grant and MMG, it'll be funny if he listens to this interview, is like I liked him as a person, and like I always prefer, like I would much rather work with people that I like hanging out with. And I know this sounds a little bit weird, but like it's really hard for me to be friends with people that I work with if they're not good at their job. Like if they don't excel at their job, like I can't shoot the shit on the phone with them. Like, hey, how was your week? I'm like, no, let's not talk about your weekend. Like, why isn't this done? What's going on? Like my first priority is business and working together. And if we can crush it on that, then like let's go have some fun together. Let's hang out. Let's talk. Let's vacation together. Whatever it might be. And I hired my COO 3-4 years ago, and he, we actually met at a FinCon, which is a personal finance bloggers conference, and he was working for a top travel site, kind of managing that. And we like kind of instantly, we hung out the whole weekend and we connected and we had a lot of fun. And I ended up bringing him on to the business for a few years. And one of the things I enjoyed most about working with him was he was great at his job, but also just I liked hanging out with him. And he was like one of the kind of few people that I've hired over the years who like excelled at his job, and also that I liked on a personal level and enjoyed talking to him. And I went to Miami and for a conference, and he lives in West Palm Beach, and I had him come down for a night, and we just like hung out, and we talked about some business, but we really just like hung out as friends for a weekend, and like honestly like very little business purpose, but it was like kind of fun.
Last question, because I got to run.
All right.
If you were to summarize a decade of your knowledge in building content-based niche businesses, what comes top of mind? What is the most powerful advice you can give to people who are interested in becoming the future rideshare guy of their own spaces?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of summary of some of the threads I've mentioned is, pick something that you're interested in, pick something that has some or a lot of business opportunity. And, I think it feels good to help people. So, if you're, can find something that's, more helpful to, drivers making 15 to $20 an hour, I think you'll get more personal satisfaction out of that than helping, hedge fund guys. So, if you can kind of gravitate towards that. And then on the actual sort of tactical side, I think content and working online, I am such a huge proponent of it because the amount of work that goes into one piece of content, and the potential reach is infinite, right? I mean, you can literally put out a blog post or a video that reaches 5 people, 10 people, 100 people, or 100 million people. And obviously, the higher you go up in that stack, it's a little bit, it's a lot tougher to reach 100 million than 5 or 10 people. But I mean, our most popular video on YouTube has 5 million views, and it's all about truck driving, super random. But, it's like you can kind of do that. I love the kind of short form platforms right now. We're investing a lot in short form content, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, because discoverability is so high. You put something out there and it can go viral a lot easier. I would almost say it's impossible, not impossible, but it's very difficult for a blog post, on a brand new site to go viral relative to a lot of the short form video platforms that are out there, since they're more, kind of algorithmic discovery based now. So I think kind of leaning into video and, really just kind of creating consistent content for a long period of time, like be a cockroach, never die. That's why I say if you pick a topic that you love and you just like doing, one podcast a week for 10 years, like good opportunity. I guarantee you, if you do one podcast a week for 10 years, good opportunities are going to come your way. And that might be more of the extreme. But, I always say like 1 year, 1 year when it comes to content, try to be consistent for 1 year. Don't even worry about monetizing for the first year. If something falls in your lap, great. But, I like that kind of 1 year threshold.
Be a cockroach.
Yeah, be a cockroach. That's a good one.
All right. Where could people find you on the internet? And thank you for letting us crawl inside your brain.
Yeah, no, that was fun. I think you asked some good, challenging, and new questions. And I haven't done an interview like this in quite a while, so it was fun. I would say if they're interested in anything rideshare, gig economy, just type it into a box on the internet, and we should pop up. And if not, let me know. If there's some box that we're not popping up on, I'll take that as a personal challenge. But we've got the rideshareguy.com, our YouTube channel. The Rideshare Guy is growing pretty quickly. I kind of share my personal, sort of thoughts on the rideshare and gig economy industries on my weekly podcast, the Rideshare Guy. And then on the content side, sort of I'm probably most active on Twitter at the Rideshare Guy. And then I've got my new podcast that's more focused on investing in startups and things like that, called Wannabe Angels. And we're doing a weekly live show there. It's a new show, but getting a lot of traction and been a lot of fun so far.
There you have it. The Rideshare Guy.
Awesome.
Love
Thanks,
it.
Greg.
Thank you.